We need action from everyone, everywhere. 17 Sustainable Development Goals. They are a to-do list for people and planet.
In 2015, 193 nations came together to put forward 17 goals that provide a blueprint of a new world where poverty was eradicated, where there was food for everyone, where water was clean, a world of education for girls and women, a world with employability that is respectful.
I see the Sustainable Development Goals as an expression of compassion and an attempt to deliver compassion in very tangible forms to alleviate specific forms of human suffering.
I believe that compassion is the instrument that allows human flourishing.
What became very clear was this was not a technological fix, it was not a financial fix, and it began a conversation between us. Compassion is one of the few things, I think, that can pull us outside of ourselves for long enough to see through a commitment to a challenge of global scale in the way that is required for the SDGs. I see compassion as sitting within SDG 17. It's that partnership piece. And so defining the nature of those partnerships, that they are in fact the engine room driving the SDGs, is our entry point here.
There's sort of this intangible process that happens when you are showing up in compassion. It begins to have this ripple effect throughout a community, throughout a family.
Compassion is so deeply rooted in us as human beings.
A number of studies are showing that compassion, like memory, is probably in the brain. It's part of our DNA.
We see this in studies of very young children when they experience distress of another child, comforting, wanting to help, wanting to alleviate that suffering.
For compassion to have withstood that evolutionary process, it tells us that it's both potent, powerful, and critical to our survival, but also our continued growth.
There is a science of compassion. There are brain imaging techniques that allow you to look at the neural pathways of compassion, and certain parts of the brain light up when someone is experiencing compassion. Neural pathways get laid down as people practice compassion training, so that's a skill that can be cultivated. We did a review of all of the literature in which compassion was treated as an outcome, and looking at what are the factors that allowed compassion to emerge. Things like gender, like personal history of experience of trauma, the moment of where a person is engaged in deciding whether to offer compassion. Is that other person like me? Do I feel secure? All of these things will influence at that moment whether I offer compassion to someone who's suffering.
Compassion is often associated with religion, and in fact, in every world religion, belief system, there's words that define or describe what we would call compassion, exemplified through the religious rites and rituals.
I think at its depth, the science of compassion becomes a theology of compassion, or at least these two fields are in deep dialogue. We need to be engaged with philosophers, with theologians to understand how their perception of compassion, their understanding, can be best studied through the tools of science to advance compassion throughout the world. One of the challenges we faced is that the different disciplines, and even within disciplines, there are different definitions of compassion.
Really, the Sustainable Development Goals are just that. It's a recognition of planetary suffering, of human suffering, and articulating how that shows up in the world.
If I'm seeing someone who is suffering, why are they suffering? What lies behind it? What are the drivers?
Empathizing with the suffering. Can we see ourselves in another's shoes in how it affects them and relate to it ourselves?
One way of looking at compassion is it's a human response to suffering that seeks to alleviate that suffering. You could call it empathy plus action.
During COVID, we saw extraordinary outpourings of compassion. Remarkably, the first time ever, scientists got together and brought out the vaccines, worked together knowing that some of the work they were doing would be completely redundant, it would be lost. They shared together knowing that someone else might win the goal. They got together because they believed in this greater good. What does it look like to design for compassion? One is about just making discussion about compassion, normalising that. It also requires, I think, business leaders to speak up about compassion. That in a world where money has become the system that drives absolutely everything, to say, this matters.
So, a very small example, running a team meeting where tradition might have it that you have your agenda that is very much focused on timelines and commitments that are economically driven, overlaying a compassion lens to that agenda, overlaying an expectation that all solutions that are entertained also must fulfill compassion-driven criteria. It changes the way that the meeting unfolds. It changes the indicators and the outcomes that are valued within that team. One of the tools that has been really profoundly important in my work is a workshop on critical conversations. If we are not skilled in these hard skills around conversation, deep listening, negotiation, collaboration, if we think of those as soft skills that are kind of add-on, not very essential, then this will go nowhere. We really need to be clear-eyed, tough-minded, but soft heart.
We've had 2 grants from Templeton World Charity Foundation. They've both been absolutely essential in advancing our thinking, allowing us to reach out to world-class collaborators and engage in this work. We've finished our initial review on the epidemiology of compassion, and we have these publications and resources now on the SDGs.
I hope that people hear this and have the same aha that all of us did when Liz first proposed that we need to center compassion in the SDGs. And they realize that it's not going to be a technical solution that's going to get there. This is a human solution. It's already something that lives within all of us.
Compassion has this strange capacity to give us the bridge to come together. The journey of compassion is as important, if not more, than the acts of compassion. And together, they enable us to know who we are in the world. They enable the world to become the world that we envisage, where everyone flourishes together.